Alright, I pulled myself together enough to get out of the house. I'm going to try to make it down to the social services office and see if I can get the paperwork going. So I wanted to talk about my grandmother's big house, because Kathy talked about the big house and she said that I made that experience miserable for her, and that's leaving a lot out. Because I probably wasn't easy to deal with, being bipolar and recently married to an abusive husband, recently out of my abusive family home. I was having blackouts at that time. It was a bad time for me. But the situation with that house had more to do with money. See, my grandmother bought that house during a period of grief. She had just found out how much money they really had after my grandfather passed away, and she kind of freaked out and bought this gigantic 2-story house. She wanted the big house. She wanted to spoil herself. She knew she had the money at that time. She was not thinking clearly. She was possibly bipolar. A lot of us are, judging by her home shopping afterwards. Anyways, so she bought this big house, not knowing what she was doing. She paid it off completely before it was finished. Now, what happened there was, pretty much as soon as they got all of the money, it was finished paying it off, they said, oh, well, the house is done. And she said, no, it's not. There's not a, what she was upset about, let me think. One of the smaller things she was upset about is that the fireplace didn't have a mantle at all. It was just kind of a hole in the wall that made fire, and she hated it. She wanted it to look like a real fireplace. They had not dug out the septic yet, so we had no septic tank. I don't know, there were a lot of problems. It was a smart house, it was a new thing, it was really expensive, and it was not finished. And she finished paying it off, expecting them to do their part, because, like me, my grandmother expected to be treated the way she treated people. She thought, well, I did my part, I gave them the money, they will do their part and do the job. And they laughed and ran away with the money. And she contacted them and said, hey, I need y'all to come finish my house. And they said, no, we're done. We've got the money. It's done. You're done. So now she's living in an unfinished house that she hates because it's not finished, that she would have hated anyway because my grandfather was not there. She didn't understand that she was trying to buy her affections away. She was very sad, and she was trying to buy the sadness away, and she thought this big, beautiful house would do that, and it didn't. It just made her more mad because they didn't finish it, and she gave them all this money, and it became a back and forth, a Simpsons-esque paint my chicken coop, make me, grr, you know. And so it went back and forth like this for a while, until one day the people who sold her the house contacted us. Well, me and her were living together at the time, and they said, we need you to come down and sign some paperwork because there's an error in your paperwork, and we just need you to come and sign your name and clear it up real fast. So what we finally found out had happened was they made a mistake when they wrote up the lease. They wrote up that she had bought both her property and the property next door. They were now trying to sell the property next door and realized that it had already been sold. It was already owned legally by my grandmother, who had no idea she owned it because she only meant to buy one property. So they thought that they could sweet talk this nice old lady into just signing that property back over to them after all of the fuss and shit that they put her through with finishing her house. And she wasn't going to be that sweet old lady for them. And she told them, I will sign the property back over to you. It's your property. and I'll happily give it back if you agree to finish my house. They didn't want to agree to that. They were done with her. All they wanted was their land back so that they could sell it to somebody else who probably would have a mortgage and take 30 years to pay it completely, and they wouldn't have time to do the same scam over again. So then the feud escalated because she didn't want to just give the property back. They didn't want to finish her house. They were mad, and they started sabotaging the big house. And after that, we would come home and they would have they like to shove dirt into the mechanics of the working gate so that we couldn't open the gate with the button. We had to manually get out and push it, and it was hard to push because it was an automatic gate, and so it just made it difficult for us to get in and out of our property. And every time we would have them come out and fix that, they would just come and do it to us again, and we knew who was doing it because the only people that had a problem with us were the motherfuckers that were trying to rip my grandmother off that had built the house and didn't finish it. It was a big thing. It was a big, big thing. So when Kathy says that I was the big problem in that situation, she is overlooking a lot to blame all of the trouble on a bipolar teenager.